To episode 24. For anyone in the UK, we're at the slightly earlier time due to daylight saving, but we'll be back to our old time in 2 weeks' time. Welcome, everyone. Lindsay and I are so excited about having this chance to speak to Erica Keswin shortly. But if you're new to Future Strong, quick intro from me. I'm Nikki Garchair. I'm one of the co-founders of Capfinity. And Capfinity is a talent tech company. We do lots of work in the emerging talent space, all from a strengths-based perspective, and we are working across assessment, development, and transformation globally. Future Strong is the brainchild of Lindsay and I. We set it up, it'll be almost, well, I think past 12 months now, Lindsay, and we like to discuss everything that relates to helping emerging talent feel stronger in the future, and all of you who listen in to support them. But over to my wonderful co-host, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Nikki. Hi, everybody. My name is Lindsay Pollock. I'm a career and workplace expert and a proud brand ambassador for Capfinity. I'm the author of 4 books. My latest is Recalculating, Navigate Your Career Through the Changing World of Work. Please introduce yourselves in the comments. Tell us who you are. Tell us where you're calling in from. We also just wanted to share a couple of greetings. Happy Diwali to those who are wrapping up the celebration. We know that November is National Native American Heritage Month here in the United States. And of course, Veterans Day is next Thursday, November 11th. So thank you to all who served. Please ask your questions throughout the broadcast. We love to incorporate your thoughts and comments. And I know you'll have a lot for Erica. We've got Shoshana Hecht, a fellow friend in the crowd. Shoshana, hi. Thanks for being here. Everyone, I know Shoshana's in New York, but tell us where you're calling in from. We've got Amy. Great to see you here today. And I'll keep shouting everyone out. But without further ado, just full disclosure, I have no journalistic integrity. Erica is a friend. Erica is a supporter. Erica, for those who often ask me where I got my glasses, which are, of course, from Peepers, Erica is my glasses inspiration. When my eyesight first started to go and I knew I needed glasses, I took a picture of Erica to the store because I've always really worshipped her spectacles. But beyond that, my daughter wanted me to tell you that Erica Keswin, who has 3 older children, has the best play set, swing set that my daughter has ever seen. So she is officially my daughter's favorite friend of mine, and just such a kind, smart person. She is the author of a new book, Rituals Roadmap, which we're going to be talking about today. But Erica, welcome, and tell us a little bit about your background and more beyond your glasses and your swing set.
Yes, thank you. It's so great to be here on this sunny day in New York City. I'm a workplace strategist, so I've spent 25 years in the workplace space, and I describe that as helping companies improve performance through people. So I've worked as an executive recruiter, connecting great people to jobs. I've worked as an executive coach and have written Rituals Roadmap, and before that, a book called Bring Your Human to Work. And the focus and the way that I like to address a lot of these issues is both from, I call it the science and stories of connection at work. And so let's look at the data and the science behind why this stuff is important. And then let's share stories and best practices of people that are actually doing it on the ground. And I think my focus is on this because many leaders would say to me over the last 25 years, they would either say it to me or maybe behind my back, which I'm used to, that this was the softer stuff. And I push back saying, maybe, but the soft stuff is really the hard stuff and some of the most important stuff, especially right now amidst the Great Resignation and the Great Reshuffle. So no better time to be having this conversation.
This is fantastic, Erica. And I'd love you to share a little bit about, for anyone listening in who's not sure what a ritual is, will you just share with us what is a ritual in how you look at it?
It's a great place to start. So my definition of rituals has 3 component parts. The first is a ritual is something to which we assign a certain amount of meaning and intention. The second part is that a ritual is something that there's typically a regular cadence. It could be something that we do every morning. It could be something we do once a week. It could be something that we do at work once a year where we come to, together to celebrate, a milestone of some sort. The third part is that a ritual is something that goes beyond its practical purpose. And so what do I mean by that? I'm sitting here again in New York City, and let's say my lights go out and I were to light a candle so that I could see what I'm doing. That's not a ritual. But if I light a candle every day at 6:00 to signify the end of the workday and the beginning of my time at home, with my husband or my kids, that's a ritual. I'm not lighting that candle because I can't see. I'm lighting it because there's meaning and intention around it. And so that's my working definition of a ritual.
I love that. And it's so funny once you become aware of rituals after reading Erica's book or following her work, how much I've noticed is a ritual that I had never talked about in that way. And it gives it even more meaning to sort of assign it that importance. Erica, you also host a really great podcast, Left to Our Own Devices. And one of my favorite things about it is the examples you give of rituals, because I think some people maybe have trouble identifying them or want to think of new ones. Can you talk about some examples of rituals, both in person, which I think a lot of us can imagine, but virtually, I think it might be a little bit harder, but still possible. Can you talk about some of your favorite rituals?
Sure. So hard. It's like picking one of your favorite children, but I will try to pick some of my favorites. So I studied rituals from the perspective of the employee life cycle. So if you're listening to this today and you're thinking rituals at work, where might they fit? Think about it from the perspective of the entire employee experience, from onboarding and recruiting to rituals in meetings, to rituals in eatings. There's a whole chapter in the book on eatings. And actually, before we got started, Nikki was sharing, and maybe she'll tell you what she saw in her office recently with people eating together. It's actually, there's a lot of science and data around one of my favorite studies that shows that firemen who are the most dedicated to the ritual of the firehouse meal and eating together, it actually correlates with higher levels of performance, and those firefighters save more lives. So eatings is a bucket. Celebrating milestones, professional development. So think about that arc. And interestingly, when I started interviewing leaders about what their rituals are at work, even after I explained, the definition, sometimes leaders weren't sure. So I came up with a question that when asked, I'd say 99 times out of 100, the leader I could literally see the light bulb coming out of, his or her head going, that's it, that's our ritual. So the magic question is, for example, I asked Marisa Andrada, the head of HR at Chipotle, when do employees feel most Chipotle-ish? When do employees feel most LinkedIn-ish, most Capfinity-ish? So Nikki, I'm going to come to you with that question. You can think about it. So two fun examples that I'll give when I ask that question. One is Chipotle, which Marisa said to me, you know what? One of our rituals is every day. So for those who, my kids happen to love Chipotle, so we go quite frequently. What I did not know is that they actually open at 10:30 in the morning, because I guess many people want to eat burritos that early. But the people that are making the burritos get in at 6:30 in the morning. And their ritual is at 10:15, before those doors open, everybody goes through the line and gets them some food. They sit down and they connect and they talk and think about the day ahead. And I got to experience it before the pandemic and actually have a meal with them. So that was one that jumped out. Another one completely different was at Allbirds. For those of you who might be familiar with the cool felt sneakers from Allbirds, one of the co-founders shared with me a ritual that's called 40 at 4. And one of the cool things about rituals is that they can come from anywhere. They can be top down, bottom up. They can come from the inside out. And this particular ritual happened when an employee went to the doctor one day and felt like he needed to really focus on his health. So he came back to the office and said to one of his teammates, you know what? I am going to get in shape. I'm going to do this many push-ups between now and the end of the year. And he took that number and he divided it by the number of days left in the year. And that number came out to be 40. So if he did 40 push-ups every day for the rest of the year, he'd meet his goal. And lo and behold, he started doing it in the office, and the guy next to him joined in, and the woman across the hall. And then another person would come down and not do the push-ups, but watch the push-ups. And this organically and authentically became this ritual of 40 at 4. And to circle back to the last part of your question, Lindsay, I had a real opportunity when I finished the book to reach out to many companies in the book to see how they were adapting their rituals during the pandemic. So the last chapter in the book is all about adapting these rituals in a remote, and now hybrid environment. And what they said was, every week, somebody would do the 40 at 4 and they would video it and they would show it to everybody and people would log on. And, what's so powerful and almost magical about rituals is that it gives you this sense of psychological safety and belonging. I mean, the research is very strong. And so during the pandemic, when people were seeing these videos, they felt connected. It reminded them why they do what they do, and why they like the people that they work with. And it was connecting them to purpose. So, those are a couple examples. Clearly, I could talk about this all day, but I'll stop there.
Erica, these are amazing examples. And I think I said to you before we started, with a background as a business in positive psychology, the rituals are just an incredible part, I think, of work. One of the things that I'm keen to know, and you mentioned the firefighters, and I love the science and story, is could you give some more examples of like why people should engage with rituals? Why is it a good thing?
Yeah. So I came up with an equation in the book, and this is the ROI. I mean, this is why, to your question, Nikki, that we should think about rituals. I would say both in our own lives, as humans, we are experiencing an unprecedented amount of stress and mental health issues, which are spilling into the workplace, as we know. And so the ROI, I boiled it down to something called the 3 Ps. And this is what rituals give us. The first P is they give us a sense of psychological safety and belonging. The second P is that they give us an opportunity to connect to purpose, which we know people really want at work. And not just, we talk about emerging talent and bringing in new people. They want to understand purpose and feel connected to that. You add those two together and you get increased performance. And let me give you some data around what that even means. So on a personal level, when we feel connected, when we have our own rituals. My own personal ritual, I go to Starbucks every morning. I stop, I take a few deep breaths. I feel the heat of the coffee on my cup, on my hands. It gives me that moment to just reflect and to connect with myself. And when we feel more connected to ourselves, to others, our oxytocin, which is that feel-good hormone, goes up, and our cortisol, our stress, goes down. So there is truly a physiological response in our bodies when we are engaged in rituals. In the workplace, I include so many studies in the book. One of my favorites found that when we feel that sense of belonging and psychological safety, we can be who we really are in the office. This is amazing. Collaboration goes up by as much as 47%, and productivity goes up by as much as 50%. So the numbers are real, and it kind of goes back to the soft stuff really is the hard stuff, that especially with some people in the office, some people at home, some people sitting in Starbucks in between, these rituals can be the glue and the stickiness that helps leaders deepen relationships with their employees right now. And that is going to help stem the tide of what we're seeing in terms of the Great Resignation.
Lindsay, I know you're going to jump in, but I just want to go with one more question. Do you think, Erica, with what everyone is navigating globally at the moment, that sort of rediscovering our rituals, because some of the things that we were able to once do in person or at work, do you think that that is some of the things that are happening around mental health or how people are feeling about work? Do you think unknowingly that the need to reestablish rituals is having an impact on us, or our loss of rituals in some ways?
I would say it's both. I think, one of the reasons why I called the book Rituals Roadmap is that it is a roadmap. And this world of work is evolving faster than we could have ever imagined. And so, when you think about that question, when do employees feel most Capfinity-ish, which, by the way, we want you to answer that at the end, Nikki. It's figuring out which of these rituals can we maintain and which rituals do we want to maintain right now, and where are there opportunities for new rituals, again, given this new environment. So, for example, I just worked with a company a few weeks ago here in New York City, and they have decided for now they're getting rid of their offices and they're going to be a fully remote company. And now once a month, they are going to come in and come together as a company. There's about 20 people. And I worked with them to help design what those in-person days were going to look like. So I said to them, first of all, this by itself, in and of itself, is a ritual. This new collaboration day once a month is a new ritual, but let's also think about your organizational values, your goals of that day, and what roles can rituals take in those days? And one of the things I think people should think about, whether it's in your own life or at work, is, beginnings and endings are what I call prime rituals real estate. And I know Lindsay has she maybe share an example of a ritual that she started during the pandemic, that really, when I heard it, it really had an impact on me. So it's a good place to start. When we're coming in for these meetings, whether we're hybrid, remote, in person, how do we begin the day? How do we end the day? How do we begin a new project, end a new project? So, Nikki, I think it's a combination of which rituals are so ingrained into our culture that it would seem crazy if they ever went away. Which ones maybe have we outgrown? And given what's going on in the world, they don't make sense. And let's think about how to incorporate some new ones.
I love this, and I'm happy to share. While I'm sharing mine, I want our audience to share theirs. Welcome, Kayla from New Hampshire. Amy is here from New York City. We've got our friend Trudy Steinfeld from Cambridge, Mass, talking about some of her rituals. Jessica Lee Dow in Pennsylvania. Everyone share yours. I didn't realize I had a ritual because I work for myself. I thought I don't have rituals. But Erica pointed one out during the pandemic because I was working from home. Every morning I would lift the shades in my home office. And when I was done with work, I would pull down the shades. And the way that Erica helped me realize it was a ritual was one day I came in and my shades were open. And my husband, trying to be helpful, had opened them. And I, being totally irrational, yelled at him and said, "Why did you open my shades?" And he said, "Because I was trying to be helpful." And I said, "But I need to open the shades." And I realized when it was missing, I had a little bit of a loss. And I think it's so interesting because that gives you insight into my neurosis. But a lot of people missed their commute during COVID, which was such a surprise. So I want to talk about that, Erica. And I also want to ask you, when it comes to this idea of being in the office, some people are obviously going fully remote or hybrid, but a lot of people do want their employees to come into the office, or their company has mandated it, and as a leader, they have no choice. I love this idea of being mindful about planning in-office days, that it's not just you're going to sit at your desk and be on Zooms anyway, or you're just going to be in back-to-back meetings and hate it. Can you give some insight into what you told that company can be a mindful way to create in-office days that are meaningful and that people want to go to?
Yeah. The word that jumps out, they've got to be intentional. I have a podcast that's called Left to Our Own Devices, excusing the cheesy pun. Left to our own devices, we're not connecting. Left to our own devices, our in-person days, we're not going to get the return on them that we would want. Meaning, we don't want someone to, commute all the way in from New Jersey to Manhattan to be doing what they could be doing at home. So here are some tips that I gave the company and I would give to anybody listening. I'd say, number one, make sure that there's a critical mass when, that's in the office, because you don't want, a couple of people to sprinkle in on one day and a couple of people sprinkle in on the other day. Again, you want to have that energy and that critical mass. So I'd say that's number one. Number two, focus on the kind of work that's very difficult to do when you are home alone. So schedule sessions around brainstorming, around innovating on the whiteboard, moving around, strategy, have your one-on-ones. Again, we talk about, emerging talent and, they want to connect with their leaders. I mean, we all do, but especially that group. Schedule your one-on-ones on those days. Again, talk about a way to get people to stay in your organization. Team building and bonding. I will have leaders say to me, this is important. And then I see their schedule of what they're doing on these days, and they're all in meetings. And then at 5:00, there's a happy hour. Couple of issues with that. I mean, I'm certainly all for a happy hour. Number one, it's not always the most inclusive. Not everybody drinks. And number two, if you value connection and bonding, you can't always do it after 5:00, especially now when people have been home for 18 months. The last thing they want to do is get home much later. And so, if it's valued, build that into the day. It is so important, because in my opinion, that is work, creating an opportunity for people to, shoot the breeze and connect. As we heard with the firefighters, it's like they're saving more lives. An example that I heard the other day, and I'll get it to you guys after it's done. I'm working on an article about it right now, but I had a meeting with David Siegel, who's the CEO of Meetup. And they just, they are meeting up, same kind of thing, once a month. And I loved, he said, they are in the morning, instead of saying everybody has to be in at 9, they're creating this trickle time. People can trickle in. And what I love about that, and the way that he articulated it is, I might have somebody on my team who's a total introvert, but wants to see people. That person might come in really early, so he or she could kind of bond and get coffee with 1 or 2 people. Somebody else might trickle in at 9 after they drop their kid off. So again, he was so intentional about building in time. And I feel like you want to make it more of a pull. Like, you want people to want to come versus you must come and this is what they're doing. So again, this is moving at such a fast pace. But these are some of my thoughts, on whatever day today is. What is it? November, I don't even know. November 5th, as people begin to design these days.
Before going to Nikki for the next question, I just wanted to point out some of the rituals that our audience have shared. Jessica has coffee in her Yeti every morning. Our friend Trudy walks her lovely dog Norm and gets coffee. Shoshana said her rituals set the tone for the whole day. Kayla takes a quick walk, kind of like a commute to get fresh air. Oh, Jessica also has a Himalayan salt lamp. And Amy writes poetry every morning. Nikki, over to you.
What an accomplished audience we have there, just straight off their rituals. Erica, I just want to ask a little bit about bringing their human to work, and pretty provocative title. It makes me conjure up a million things. I would love to hear from your perspective, what was the sort of thinking behind the book, and what are some of the hints and tips, if people haven't read it, that they can share?
Yeah. So, lately I've been talking about how to bring your human to work, whether you're in the office, at home, or anywhere in between. So I think it's become, the idea has become even more important in this new world of work that we're in. But the focus of the book was really about how can you create, a more human culture where people are real and open and honest and vulnerable. Sometimes I feel like that word is overused, but I will say, when I talk to companies where their engagement has been up over the pandemic, which people never saw coming, it was when leaders actually shared what was going on in their lives, that not everything is so perfect. Yes, I'm a leader and I might be doing my Zoom calls from, the country or my house in the Hamptons, but I have, a college daughter who's really struggling, or I have all these different things going on. And so, and going back to the science and the stories, there's a lot of that in that book as well, which is, I really believe, and I showed it through a lot of the science, that creating a more human workplace is not only good for people, but it is great for your business, and that those things are not mutually exclusive. And so that's sort of those are some of the takeaways from the book. And each chapter focuses on a different lever that a leader can pull to make a change in their workforce. So there's a chapter on giving back, how companies are involved in, things outside of their core business, focused on purpose. There's a chapter on wellness. The last chapter in the book is on gratitude and saying thank you. That many of the tools, and these are many tools in your tool belt. And what I love about them, and rituals are another tool, is that they're accessible to everyone and they don't have to cost a lot. And if you're intentional, you can bring many of these things to life.
I love how diverse your examples are. I really admire how accessible the topic is. And speaking of gratitude, our colleague LaToya in Florida, I love this. I'm going to read the whole thing. It's so fantastic. During the pandemic, I started wiggling my toes and taking 3 deep breaths. I also blink 3 times before I get out of bed and peek out my window for 30 seconds to check out my front lawn. It's my gratitude ritual. And Rob makes his own skinny latte every morning before he starts working at home. Coffee seems to be part of a lot of rituals, which is fantastic. Eric, I know that kind of started this whole thing for you. Let's look forward a little bit. I would love to hear, as we're coming to the end of the year, your predictions for 2022. Where are you thinking? What are you watching for? What's on your mind? You know, if you want to venture some predictions, great, or just love to know where your interest is for the coming year.
Yeah, I love that question. I would say that I think that the Great Resignation, the Great Reshuffle, whatever we're calling it, is going to continue for the foreseeable future for a variety of reasons. We could have a whole separate topic on that. I'd say that's number one. Companies are realizing that the response to that is not, it's not just compensation. I mean, 9 out of 10 people leave their managers, and not necessarily because of compensation. So I believe that there's going to be a renewed, January 22 focus on a bunch of things. Number one, I would say wellness, and intentionally building in a culture of wellness. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. Figuring out flexibility, this balance of connection and being in the office, but also having an opportunity for people to be flexible, because we are still, this pandemic is not over and there's still a lot of issues related to it. And we should have had flexibility before this thing anyway. And the third is the importance of personal and professional development, that people want to feel like, especially, new talent, emerging talent, people coming right out of college, they're going to get in their jobs, but they want to see a path. They want to understand how they can grow on the job. And so I've been thinking a lot about this issue of mobility and showing a path, because gone are the days of the 50 rungs in the ladder at IBM or General Motors, where like your path for the next 25 years was on a chart. That just doesn't exist. And so I do think that needs to be a big part of this conversation, especially in this next year.
Erica, such sound advice. Thank you for taking the time to put these things on everyone's radar. I think we need rituals now in our lives more than ever. You gave me the question around Capfinity rituals, so let me share a few. And I am sad that we don't get to eat together as much as we did, but I did witness it in the London office yesterday. But I think a lot about my US team. We're a virtual team working together. We will meet next week for the first time. So anyone listening in, think about what you want your first face-to-face ritual to be. But thinking of that team, and you'd hope this with Capfinity, but strengths are a massive part of our rituals. And the team, when they get together or we think about our upcoming strategy, we will often go back to our individual and team strengths. And that really helps center us. And it also lets us, share a bit more of ourselves. And it also allows people to think about maybe some things that they haven't had a chance to share before with their colleagues or their managers. So strengths plays a really huge part. But you've certainly in this episode made me think about more rituals that I would like to get the teams and the business looking at. So I will come back on another episode, Lindsay. You can hold me to it and share more things that we've put in place. Lindsay, I sometimes think I'm the science and you're the story, and you're amazing at now bringing together 3 tips that we will share. Thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you, Nikki. I like that. You're the science and I'm the story. So on this 24th episode of Future Strong, we were so pleased to welcome Erica Keswin, author of Bring Your Human to Work and her new book, Rituals Roadmap, which is fantastic. 3 takeaways. Number 1, the soft stuff, as we often call it, is the important stuff. And as you're thinking about your company, whether it's in-person, hybrid, or remote, Erica says rituals can be the glue that connects all of those locations together. And I think we're all looking for that glue. Number 2, how do you create rituals? Erica gave some incredibly tactical and quite simple advice, whether it's top down or bottom up. Look to beginnings and endings as a time for rituals. And my favorite, meetings and eatings. And from the comments in the audience, it seemed that coffee was a really good place to start if you're not sure where your rituals are. As everyone knows, I go to my coffee cart on 83rd and Broadway every morning for my version of Starbucks. And third, Erica knows the science too. The ROI of rituals is what she calls the 3 Ps. Rituals create psychological safety and a sense of belonging. They create purpose, even helping people feel that their stress levels can go down because they're making a real contribution. And of course, what we all need to care about is performance. And her sort of signature story, which I love, is that firefighters who eat together save more lives. So thank you, Erica Keswin, for joining us on this episode of Future Strong. Can you tell everybody where to connect with you or find more of your work?
Sure. Thanks, Lindsay. You can find me on my website, ericakeswin.com. And I have, a one-pager that I'm happy to share with anybody that really summarizes some of the things that we've talked about today. So if you want to get a copy, you can email me at erica@ericakeswin.com. Happy to send it to you, and to keep these great conversations going.
Thank you again, Erica Keswin. We'll see everybody back here in 2 weeks on Friday, November 19th for episode 25 of Future Strong. On behalf of Nikki Garcia and Capfinity, thanks everyone for joining. And we hope you have a Friday ritual to end the week. Thanks everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, Nikki.